Good afternoon, or if you're halfway around the world, good middle of the night. I'm Dr. David Rosensweet, and you've connected with I Wonder Doctor Live. And on this segment at the 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time in the United States, we like to address the whole subject of how people respond to stress. Because in the world of medicine, a dysfunctional or an excessive response to stress, creating fight or flight biology in your body, is really diminishing to your health, especially over time. It's one of the big ones that every physician and nurse practitioner encounters when you're working with someone who's not well. So stress, I didn't say get rid of stress. I said it's how we respond to stress. And over the course of all of our lifetimes, one of the wonderful things that we can learn how to do is get better and better and better at responding to stress. And here's another part of it. Should it happen that all of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of a very upsetting internal experience, you're angry, you're sad, you feel awful, you feel shame, that's okay. That's part of the learning process. Your next skill is, how can I work with exactly what got triggered in my body, in my heart, in my emotions? In other words, how quickly can I surround myself with myself, quiet down, let the internal intensity get softer, quieter. Sometimes for me when that happens, it happened last night. A certain event happened while I was working on trying to clean up some registers, some air registers, and someone came in and said something to me that was upsetting, and to my utter shock, I had a totally inappropriate response internally. I got really upset. And I knew from that point on that it wasn't for me to go talk to this family member. It wasn't for me to discuss it. It wasn't for me to say anything to them. It was all about what had gotten triggered in me, the emotional pain in me. And what I did is I saw it happen, I felt it, and I just stayed with it. I'm used to it. If I won't do anything awful is the next step, like communicate to somebody or bark back, or sometimes I even bark, but I immediately quiet down and just stay with myself. When I take responsibility for that uncomfortable feeling and feel it, and stay quiet, I'll get quiet, and it will blow over in a minute, in 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. I'm starting to take an internal breath and go, oh, I can rejoin the dinner table, the conversation. I am now reasonable. And then when I enter back into relationship from a reasonable stance, I'm so grateful that I didn't create more of a mess. And I find that the re-interaction, rather than pulling back and being upset for a day or a week, that going back into relationship, even when I'm not perfectly back assembled, oh my, it just, everything just, then the presence of the rest of my family is very nurturing to me, and it helps accelerate my return to being, what? Normal, or beneficial, or happy, or calm. So, great skill. If you get provoked, try and make it stop right there at your own boundaries. Take responsibility for the elephant in the room, which is my own internal pain, my emotional pain I'm talking about, my anger or my fear or my sadness. Just be with it. It'll quiet down. If I recognize it, if I accept it for the energy that it is, and I don't act out further, I hold on to the reining in, and then I just stay there, it will quiet down really quickly. No muss, no fuss. No further damage because I went out of control and then I made it worse. So, in that light, many of you are probably in committed relations. You might be living with someone. It could be a roommate. It could be a spouse. It could be more than one person. And those live-in situations where the commitment and the daily interaction is very significant, what do those turn out to be? The cauldron of our real life. And it turns out that it's in those relationships that we're closest to where some of the more uncomfortable things can come out and not be so polite. And those relationships matter so much. The better you can make them, the more fun and beautiful day-to-day life is. And yet, my goodness, we all have little glitches in our get-along. And that's one of the things I want to address today for those of you who are in relationship. Now, it turns out there may be many of you who are viewing us today that you say, well, I'm not in relationship. Well, here's a great thing. You're in a university, let's say at this phase for you, it's to prepare you for a relationship. And it's a great world that you're traveling in because it can be a great practice ground. So if you spend most of your time alone, but you go to the grocery store and you're standing there in the checkout line, how you interact with that cashier, how you interact when you ask for directions. There's a myriad of minor, they're all significant, I shouldn't have used the word minor, interactions where you can practice in those to prepare you for big time, for committed in-house living or in-business living. Relationships. My goodness, they're the greatest teachers. They're the greatest venue for spiritual growth I find that exist. The ones close to you can really bring it out of you, the good, the bad, and the not so good at all. And if you go in there with more and more skills over the course of your lifetime, the relationships get more and more interesting, more and more kind, sweet, nurturing. They're one of the richest things that are available to us is our relationships with others. Such a wonderful venue for love, for friendship. So that's one of the subjects we want to address today, and we want to address it over several different live events because, my goodness, this is the university we are all in. So I'd like to bring in a special guest as soon as he arrives, and I know this guest very well because I met him when he came into the world. I was there.
The very first second.
The very first second you came into the planet Earth. It's one of the most profound and moving moments of my whole life.
Many people may not know that you delivered 400 babies, and I was number one.
You were number one.
Probably an influencer of a career choice there for a while.
It definitely was. This is my son and my business partner and co-creator, Joshua I Wonder Doctor, is a creation of both of us. And now
technically my last name is not I Wonder Doctor.
It isn't? Thank you. All these years I called you I Wonder Doctor.
You could have named me that.
And then we've also brought in a wonderful team of supporters that we now have. So I Wonder Doctor has expanded beyond us and our original benefactor. Bless her, make it all possible for us. But here we are, and yes, we want to talk about relationships.
When this morning you and I were preparing for this day, and this came up, and it's been one of the most inspiring subjects of my life. As some of you may know, I met my wife when I was still a teenager. We've been together for 27 years. We've known each other for 29 years. And like every couple, we've had life challenges.
Are you 30, or are you 40, or are you 50?
You can
29
do the math.
years. I actually know how old you are. You were a teenager too.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the ways, and right now, some people that I'm very close to are in relationship challenges. And the piece that came up in our conversation this morning that rings really pertinent to me, and it has for a very long time, and part of this lesson I learned from you a long time ago, or the way that I've translated, is that love is a verb. And I think we forget this. And the important part of the verb is that it is an action that we take, not an action that is brought upon us. And that the act of loving, reaching outside of myself to love another being, is the most fulfilling part of love. It's the piece that makes me whole. Like as many people have, I had a myth in me. And luckily I solved it quickly. But the myth was, if I finally found that right person who loved me enough, that I'd be whole and I'd be complete and I'd feel fantastic. And my wife is awesome. And she loves me very much. And it's not to say that being loved isn't a gift of gifts of gifts. But really, the thing that I think is the key to our life success, probably one of the biggest successes as I see it that I've ever had in my life, is that I learned that the act of being a loving being is so satisfying. It makes me whole. And I'm just sort of hogging the mic here, but we're in my territory of stuff I really love.
Yeah.
And I opened with relationships around me that came from a great core, and they're good beings, and I love both.
They loved each other when they first met, and
yes,
had loving experiences, even went so far as to marry.
Right. And why? Why is it not there now? What is happening to pull them apart? And I know that this is...
Why are they at the vestibule of divorce, for example?
Yeah.
How'd they get there? They met loving each other.
Exactly. And I know that there's a million ways and a million parts, and this isn't to say that this is universal and always occurs, but one of the things that I see is that if you start with needing to be loved, it can translate into day-to-day actions like coming home from work exhausted, like will happen to me. And if I have an expectation that if I walk in the door and I'm loved enough, I'll be okay, and my spouse were to have a same expectation of that moment, going from the place of I need to be loved, we are set up to immediately be unhappy and to forget that the other being is not getting the love they need, and to say something to the other person that is not coming from a loving space because we're expecting to be loved.
So you're a little mad before you start because you didn't walk in the house and get the amount of love, whatever quantity that was supposed to be, to make you feel better because you were tired.
Yeah.
So you've got a loaded demand in there, and then they don't live up to it because maybe they're having their day. Maybe their day isn't perfect.
Yeah.
And so then what happens when they don't give you the love that you want?
Well, then I'm a little grumpy.
Yeah.
And I do something that is less than perfectly loving. And then their response is a reciprocal tit for tat. Yeah. And then my response is, well, I'm not getting what I need. So it's, you know, as a
little while longer, the two of you are very conflict and working against each other and having uncomfortable feelings. And you do that for a day, a month, a week, a year, 5 years, and it can dismantle a relationship that started out loving.
Yeah.
I'd like to pick up on something you said about loving. Like, for one thing, I grew up in an era where we were taught to search for our soulmate and search for the love of our life. And there was a myth going on there. I thought that, yes, the answer to whatever ways I didn't feel good about myself or good about life or felt unfulfilled, well, I would meet that perfect mate, and what would that mate do? They would give me everything that I was lacking. And I think that basic orientation led me into an inappropriate startup and daily functioning in relationship. So I'm looking for, where's the love? Oh, you have a scowl. Your face doesn't look so good to me. That doesn't look very loving. I'm saying inside of my own head. And then so I'm getting a little irritated. What happens to the person that I'm getting irritated at? They get a little scared. So their face transforms, and they, instead of looking happy and loving, that got a little shaken up by my own emotional energy, and then what my face looked like as I was judging them for not loving me enough. That scares them. Their face looks a little more contorted, and then I look at their face and I go, gee, my perfect person would look beautiful every minute. Never once thinking that I affected someone else. And I affected how they looked. I affected how they felt. And so then I would say, well, my perfect person would be beautiful all the time. They were beautiful in the beginning, but obviously I didn't see who they really were, even though their face, their appearance, just for openers, was really a lot of the result of any judgment I was doing or any assessment I was doing is, you're not loving me enough. And these are things ping-pong back and forth within couples to finally say, this couldn't be my mate. They would be loving, if it was really my mate, they'd be loving me perfectly every moment of the time. Not that I would stop to think, am I loving them perfectly every moment of the time? Am I a perfectly loving being?
And here's one of the places that I see this one play out. It's who's going to cowboy up first,
right,
or cowgirl up first.
Right.
Because that description you're doing of what happens when you come home and you're a little grumpy and maybe they're a little grumpy or they're having a bad day or you're having a bad day, and it starts that chain back and forth you're talking about where I'm a little less polite and they're a little less polite.
Yeah.
It's not going to get resolved by getting the other person to finally say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, stop and think about how skillful you are changing your very own self. I mean, anyone who's really cared about that discovers that it's a piece of work to change your own self. But what are you asking of your partner? I'm going to change you. I want you to change. I'm telling you, as a physician, I've been in the profession of trying to help people change. And I want to say, what I've learned is I've got the most hands on the steering wheel with my own self. And you go to try and change somebody else, that is quite a piece of work. So you want to let go of these expectations you might have of someone that they're going to show up perfectly in the moment, especially when you yourself don't necessarily have that ability.
And it's not easy. In the middle of a tiff or a fight, there are actions that other person has done that probably are less than perfect.
Yes.
And it's really, really tempting to want to make certain that they're aware of the things that they've just done, that
Right.
if they just change it to be okay. And it takes such a leap
Yes.
to not, and to own your own part. And just own your own part. And by the way, not have an expectation that if I own my part, immediately she will too.
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna apologize. Okay, honey, it's true, I came in the door grumpy. Your turn.
Right. Guaranteed failure.
Right, but if I can just do that, just own my part, whatever it is.
I love that, to take you back to what you said earlier, who's going to cowgirl or cowboy up first? Because I have come to study this enough and know myself in the situation enough to know that once I've stepped over the line, once I've gotten grumpy, once I've said something a little foul, game over. The most efficient and successful thing I can possibly do is totally let go of any expectations I have of the person that I've come into that kind of edgy conflict with, and focus on myself, that there is no remedy. The only thing I can possibly do is, number one, come to quiet down within myself. No discussion's going to do it, no back and forth, no communication's going to do it. Or as you just pointed out, no apology and then waiting for the, and what's your apology? Nothing. There's only one thing that works. I come within myself, I take care of myself, and I bring myself back into decency. That means I'm taking responsibility for the pain that's going on in me. And I forget about what's going on in someone else in that situation that I'm interacting with. That is a crucial point. I must come to responsibility that I'm a problem. I was a problem. And then, like you pointed out there, if I get 100% responsible, the next natural thing that's going to happen is I'm going to feel humbled. I'm going to feel remorse. I'm going to feel regret. And out of that comes a natural apology. And then, as you said, and I'm just elaborating on what you were saying, that apology then comes out in a natural, and then that's heart-feelable. And I might be making that apology to my partner who's been upset by the whole interaction. And like you pointed out, I'm just elaborating on what you said. I cannot go into that apology with any kind of expectation that anything is going to come back my way. You don't know. They could be more upset. It could take a couple minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes for them to quiet down, and you don't even want that criteria.
And I see another one. It's the tainted apology.
Yeah.
It's an apology with a request. Well, you're totally right, honey. I came home grumpy, but you something.
Right. But you made me grumpy.
but you.
Right.
And
it's a phony apology.
Yeah. Or even if it's legit.
That's right.
Even if what she did was less than perfect.
Right.
It doesn't matter. The part that matters is that I start from a place of apology. And I was blessed with a wife who was born this way. And 9 times out of 10, this is what happens in a relational fight. She just owns her part. And not from an expectation that I will own my part, but it has a magical counterpart. That when she does that, or you do that, by the way, you're amazing at this. And you don't have an expectation that I also apologize and I also own my part. You just own your part, or Jen's owning her part. All of a sudden, whatever anger was in me that I wanted to counter, it's not a magic diffuser, but it can be. It creates the space for me to go, oh, I'm sorry. It's the reverse. When she owns her part first and doesn't demand of me that I own mine, it creates this magical vacuum where I can either keep going at her,
right,
or I can go, it starts to set up little alarm bells like, oh, wow. And
that's the miracle of how we balance each other. I mean, in the gifts that we can bring to one another. Like when I first met Kim, I saw this very unusual behavior she had, that if she got uncomfortable, she would let go pretty quickly, far quicker than I ever would. And I started realizing that, oh, it is possible to let go. Here's a living human being that can be authentic in the moment and then actually let go really quickly. It's not something you have to hold on to. This is a side point, but it was a big gift to me because I started getting inspired. Well, look at this. This is a human being who really lets go really quickly, doesn't hold on to things. So that's just a side point, how we learn and are gifted by the strengths and talents of those who we choose to be with very often.
And I would say that's an amazing gift that we may not all have, because once a fight starts, adrenaline kicks in. And obviously I'm not the doctor here, but it becomes not a magically easy thing to bring down my blood pressure and bring down my pulse and do all those things. And so it is an act of cowboying up to do it actually in the moment when emotions are flaring. But I don't think anything has a greater chance of diffusing it than that. It's sort of very related to what we said, but back to where we started. If love is a verb, and what I do in relationship is what gives it the greatest chance of healing, and I know I sort of said this in the beginning, but I sort of had a misnomer, and sometimes I still do, that I should be good because it's like Mother Teresa to do so. My moral obligation is to be a good person and a loving person. But one of the magical life lessons for me is that for very unaltruistic reasons, for one could almost call selfish reasons, self-serving reasons, to be a loving person is wonderful for my sense of self and my building of trust in myself. And every time I do a courageous act of being loving in the face of something other than that, it's strength building. So the other funny byproduct of this, or amazing byproduct of this, is that it's actually an amazingly beneficial for me
Right.
act to be loving. Not only does it actually, I think, do good in the world and make more
Exactly.
friends and help children and countries,
Exactly.
but each individual gets a more fulfilling life for the choice of the stance of being loving.
Of the verb.
Yeah.
And I must say that it's not how I started out, as I was saying before, but it was a shock to me that, number one, no one was able to love me enough. That was a very wrong approach to the world. And number two, like you're saying, I started learning that where the real pleasure, the deepest pleasure, the most rewarding pleasure was being loving. That's where it was doing a loving act, or saying something loving, or being loving, or just something as simple as pausing to see the beauty in my beloved, or pausing to feel the beauty in her voice or in her kindness, paying attention to, there's the richness, there's the fulfillment, it's in the beauty of the other person. And then what is the difference between being loved and loving? Like loving being a verb, it's got several actions that actually will work, so I'd like to just enumerate them. One is being kind. One is listening. Another is listening. Another is reducing the fear of one's partner. Another is increasing the security of one's partner, rather than scaring one's partner or getting upset.
And say another is fighting to arrive at the truth, not fighting to win.
Yes.
I mean, not that I'm an advocate of frequent fighting, but sometimes it's a natural relational event. And I think the core difference is, what is my motive?
Right.
It's my motive that I'm going to prove that I'm right, and I'm going to use any tool at my disposal, including my big brain, because I'm clever. Or, no matter how angry I am, no matter what is going on, if my ultimate objective is to arrive at the truth, it's a different kind of fight. It can still involve yelling occasionally, it can still involve those things, but it's not to win.
Well, we love this topic.
We could go on.
We think
and on.
that it makes a topic that makes the world go round. My hope is that we get to address this in several weeks in I Wonder Doctor Live. I'm a little concerned that, boy, we've covered a lot of different things that can really make a difference. And in the interest of giving one practice for people this week, I would say one thing to practice for those of you who find this interesting or find this appealing is approach the world from your world. From what can I see? What's actually going on in my world? Is there beauty in people? What's their voice like? What does their face look like? And can I be kind? Is there some act of kindness, an act of loving that I can actually do towards others? Just as a practice, ask yourself, what could make this person that matters so much to me have a nicer time in this moment? Sometimes it's just being spacious. I mean, here's a practice that I would recommend, is that allow your partner, the space to be exactly where they are. When I come home, on my best days, I accept exactly what I encounter, no matter what that is. That's an act of kindness. That's a specific act of kindness, where I'm not judging, I'm not trying to say, well, this evening would go better if she would change, so I'm going to work towards getting her to change. No, the most powerful practice that I can possibly do is to be the space for her to be exactly where she is, wherever that is. That's the safest thing for her, and that allows her the safety. And if you provide someone with safety and caring, you care for them, that helps them. So the practice would be accept who's in your life for exactly where they are in that moment. That's an act of reducing the fear and increasing the security. That's what loving means as being a verb. And then since we are together every day, it'll be easy for us to be doing this together in the future as we look into the various things that can really lead to the beauty of relationship and the power of relationship to increase our ability to be loving.
Well, Father, I'm going to roll myself out of here.
All right.
Fun joining you.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll see you on the flip side.
So, if someone calls in at 888-502-8886, we have a few more minutes. We could answer your question, or we could say that if a call doesn't come in, we can say, we welcome you to I Wonder Doctor Live as it relates to our emotions, our mind, and how we're responding to stress. And these are all archived, and we'll let you know that through an email so that you can find this in YouTube or in Facebook, so you don't necessarily have to tune in to the exact time that you're here. So just in conclusion of today, because I'd like to leave you with one thing that you could do, is can you accept the people in your life for exactly where they are in the moment? And in order to do that, here's another practice. Can you accept yourself for where you are in any moment? That's one of the kindest and loving things that you can do for yourself. So if you're not in relationship, you can practice this foundational skill that can help you enormously in any relationship that you enter, from the most casual and social to the intimate relationships of those who we live with and are committed to, and to family. Here's the practice. Become conscious from time to time during the day and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And no matter what that is, feel it and accept it. Allow the emotion that is in you in the moment to be exactly what it is. Feel it and accept it. As you get skilled at feeling, accepting what's going on in you, then it becomes so much easier to feel and accept the people that are so close to you in this lifetime for wherever they are. It's a wonderful foundation to begin relationship with, or to enter into relationship with. And so I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for the purpose of focusing internally, and ask yourself, what am I feeling in this moment? What am I feeling? Not so much the words to describe it. Can you feel what you're feeling? That's the practice. That's the homework. Even if you are bewildered and you go, oh my gosh, I just got to ask the question of what am I feeling and I can't tell. That's okay. We all begin somewhere. I began there in my own exploration of what do I feel. I didn't know what I felt. But keep asking yourself that question. What an important thing to increase your own safety and your own functionality as we're moving through our world of ourself and others. Here's the homework. From time to time during your day, pause to ask yourself, what do I feel? And if you don't feel anything, keep on it. That intention, you'll become skilled at it over time. And then the next step is if you can identify what you feel, stay with that feeling and feel it. And allow it to be exactly what it is. That will be an act of unconditional love. You'll be accepting yourself for who you are. How do you discover what self-love is? You do acts of loving for your own self. That means you do an act of accepting yourself. So if you're not in relationship, or if you are in relationship, it can all begin with an act of loving towards oneself. In identifying what am I feeling, and no matter what that is, keep feeling it. That is an act of acceptance if you keep feeling it and allow it to be the energy that it is, and you'll find something amazing. That's healing. And your feelings will transform sooner or later into feeling good and feeling peace. I can guarantee you that. And then if you can bring that to the people that are really important to you in life, where you're accepting them no matter where they are, that's going to help them. That's an act of loving. So I'm Dr. David Rosensweet. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you to our guest, Joshua. And we will continue this discussion over I Wonder Doctor Live, 2 o'clock on Thursdays, Eastern Standard Time. Call in and ask us your questions at 888-502-8886. Good to be with you.